insights. Hello and welcome to episode 15 of Jungian Psychology for Writers Season 1. Today we are finally going to talk about the 4 psychological quadras. We have spent 7 videos understanding the convincers or FITE users and the supporters or TIFE users, and before that we have spent 7 videos understanding the impactors or NISE users, as well as the attractors or SINE users. This video is going to rely on the information that I have given in these 14 videos, and therefore I am not going to give any recaps in this video, and I would instead recommend you watch all the 14 videos before. And if you combine the 4 psychological groups, then the quadras emerge. The cartographers are attractors who are convincers, the explorers are attractors who are supporters, the strategists are impactors who are convincers, and the navigators are impactors who are supporters. This video right here about the 4 psychological quadras will help you deepen your understanding of what you are. It will be about general writing behaviors that these 4 quadras have and that emerge from combining the 4 psychological groups, the convincers, supporters, impactors, and attractors. It is a long video and I definitely recommend you watch the entirety of it because sometimes I compare different quadras to each other, and also I would recommend you watch it a couple times. And let's just start right away with the cartographers. Cartographers are convincers who are also attractors. The attractors part, of course, gives them the extroverted intuition, introverted sensing, and the convincers part gives them extroverted thinking and introverted feeling. The 4 cartographer types are the ESTJ, ISTJ, ENFP, and INFP. On the one hand, they express introverted feeling, which makes them want to write about something specific or something they value, an experience or a principle. It could be anything really. On the other hand, they express extroverted intuition, which makes them want that value connect to as many audiences as possible. They always want to write the story they carry in their hearts and turn it into an awesome achievement that connects to as many people as possible. But how to actually create this achievement is something they learn only through repeated engagement with the story. The longer they write, rewrite, edit, research, and plan, the more pieces and elements they find, and that way the story improves more and more until they are finally satisfied with the desirability and the importance of their achievement. They always find that they need another draft because their story still isn't that amazing achievement that will connect to as many people as possible. In other words, cartographers discover the whole map first, and then they are ready to plot the correct course on the map that they have discovered. And that is why I call them the cartographers. Since the final version only manifests through process, they often feel like they have to change large parts of what they have written.
It was about page 450 when Elsa appeared for the first time, and I was not having any problems with the book up to that point. It was going great guns, and yet I saw Elsa and I knew instantly that I had made a mistake and that Elsa was my character. And so I threw those 450 pages and that, 11 months worth of work away and started over.
To understand this behavior a little better, we have to look at why cartographers cling so much to their projects. Their extroverted intuition imagines a future in which they have finished their amazing extroverted thinking achievement and are earning all those rewards their introverted sensing wants to enjoy. And their introverted feeling really values this dream of success. Their introverted sensing is all about endurance and discipline, which gives the cartographer the endurance to keep working. They love to research and gather advice, but they tend to rely far too much on gathered theory, which is an expression of their extroverted thinking. They tend to outsource problem solving. When they don't know how to approach a problem, they would rather outsource their thinking and look for writing advice, and then they overly rely on that writing advice. Even more so than the strategists, the cartographers have introverted sensing faith in writing advice, while the strategists are more insistent on their vision and they tend to dismiss writing advice here and there because it might take them away from their vision. The cartographers want systems the most, and they really like to develop systems because systems promise a guarantee for success. So here we have a little bit of a discrepancy because the explorers are actually the ones who create the best systems through routine and experimentation. They just find them at some point. And then the cartographers are the ones who basically steal them from them because they really want to have these shortcuts and these guarantees for success because their introverted feeling is so invested in the idea of success. The genres the cartographers write in are science fiction, fantasy, mostly. They can, however, study whatever they want to do and create systems to make happen whatever they want to make happen. Next up are the explorers. Explorers are supporters who are also attractors. Explorers express extroverted intuition and introverted sensing, which is the attractor part, and they express extroverted feeling and introverted thinking, which is the supporter part. And the explorer types are the ISFJ, the ESFJ, the INTP, and the ENTP. Very important writer types in that quadra. Oh yes. They express introverted sensing, which makes them write about something that gives them an experience or a physical reaction. But it's not so much an experience they value, like the cartographers, but rather an experience of which they need to determine what it is, because they express introverted thinking, not introverted feeling. They want to explore experiences and emotions, because all introverted thinking users have a need to explore their own emotions. However, due to their extroverted feeling, they have a need to have their story provide some sort of value to audiences, and this need is doubled because of their extroverted intuition, which makes them want to connect to audiences and be desirable to them. Their story is not an achievement, but it is the writer reaching out and providing value to audiences. What value can that be? Well, most of the time they project their own introverted sensing need for enjoyment onto audiences and aim to provide this as value to them. Whatever I enjoy is going to be something that they enjoy. And they are pretty sure, and they're also right with that the audience values entertainment and values enjoyment. And so the introverted sensing and extroverted intuition and extroverted feeling combination makes the explorer writers into the ultimate entertainers, essentially. They can also want to show up a flaw in the system. Their attractor side, expressing introverted sensing, makes them prefer repetition and routine, which makes them experts in the systems they surround themselves with. But at some point, their introverted thinking figures out flaws and learns how to introduce more efficiency into those systems, which includes observing our social systems and detecting flaws in them. They may then, driven by a need to help from their extroverted feeling, preach this as a message, because they're trying to be helpful to the social system by improving it. This is the perfect segue to my next point. Explorers tend to be really good at understanding and improving systems, which includes systems for writing. And the fact that they constantly create systems makes them into very efficient entertainers. And this is why they are such important writer archetypes. And it is so important for us to understand them and how they work, because if we are not part of the Explorer Quadra, then there is a lot of valuable insight to gain from how these people work. And then maybe we can take a tool out of their toolbox, for instance. Watch Brandon Sanderson's lectures. He just gives us these systems. Okay, so how do they write? Just like cartographers, they need to write the story first and tell it to themselves before they get an idea of what they actually have. This, of course, is a result of them expressing introverted sensing. They just really like repetition and routine. But then, different than the cartographers, they try to figure out how the story can provide value to audiences. This means that the narrative structure they get from their explorative writing is oftentimes very close to the final structure. They allow themselves to be guided by what they find in terms of world building, character development, and plot, and only apply tweaks to increase the efficiency of whatever value they wish to provide to audiences. So it's not about the writer's value, but it is about what value they can deliver to audiences. No big restructuring and rewriting like what the cartographers do. Why is this? Explorers don't express much introverted intuition, so they don't have that urge and a drive to pursue a specific target. And they don't express much introverted feeling, so they don't hook so easily onto a specific element, or message, or principle. Explorers might insist on creating a specific experience, or explore a specific emotion, which can provide a framework for their narrative, but without introverted feeling and without introverted intuition, they are the most likely to allow the story to lead them, and to go off track and explore things that they didn't plan on exploring.
I hate the idea of having to sit down and have everything planned out before you write. Here's my map, and here's this, and here's that. It doesn't have to be like that. You can also find your way through the geography of a country, the culture of a country, and the rules of a world or of a secret order of police in the course of that first draft. That's I think the whole point of making it messy and full of exposition that you'll have to take out later, but where you are telling yourself the story.
Explorers have an easier time writing because writing itself is more pleasurable, and they do not insist on creating a valuable achievement, a pursuit that often keeps cartographer writers, for instance, from gaining experience. Not, however, the explorers, because they really, really enjoy writing and they really enjoy reading. They read the most and also perhaps write the most, or at least just as much as the strategists. The genres that explorer writers write in are science fiction, of course, fantasy, of course, but also romantasy. The entire romantasy sector, in my opinion, is mostly explorer writers and a couple of navigators. But it is literally mostly one of the explorer writer archetypes. And we're gonna get to that when we get to that. They also write horror, which is actually very interesting because when it comes to dark humor and sex and gore, we find those mostly represented in the explorers, but also the strategists, but for very different reasons. Strategists want to impact an audience, and they want to be the most impactful, and shock value oftentimes is a tool to increase the impact of a story. But explorers kind of allow their introverted sensing to lead them, and they want to determine how they themselves react to something shocking or something arousing. Some explorers really like to write for their own pleasure and for rereading their own stories. Also, they project their own lack of introverted feeling onto their characters, which means they don't really value side characters and sometimes even main characters. And that's why it is very easy for explorer writers to kill off characters, especially side characters. They just don't have a lot of empathy for them. Next up, the navigators. They are supporters who are also impactors. Navigators express the cognitive function of extroverted sensing and introverted intuition, as well as extroverted feeling and introverted thinking, which of course is the supporter part. Navigators are the INFJ, ENFJ, as well as the ISTP and ESTP. With navigators, we have a driving force again, something that really hooks onto a specific element, introverted intuition. Introverted intuition gives the navigator a lot of impulse and moving power. They often take on more momentum and get faster and more impatient the closer they get to their goal. The desire always comes first, and since impactors don't express much extroverted intuition, they don't care so much about desirability or connecting to audiences. They do, however, care about providing value to audiences because of their extroverted feeling. Navigators hope that their stories impact, teach, and improve audiences in some way through helping them emotionally or giving them an important lesson or a life lesson or wisdom or skills and techniques even, or just by sharing experiences that make people stronger. This may sometimes clash with their introverted intuition, where they either neglect their desire or they neglect that they should provide value to audiences and they only write for themselves. But these two functions often combine, and then the element the navigator desires is the one that provides value to audiences. Their extroverted sensing additionally makes them want to make sure that their text is impactful and will stay in the audience's mind as a sort of lesson that will remain there and improve them and help them forever and ever.
With all my books, the one thing I do know when I start writing the actual words on the page, I do know where I intend to end. I don't know the path I'm going to take to that ending, but when I actually start to write the book, after I finished all the planning and the thinking, I feel I'm ready to write the actual words because I know where I'm going to land.
Since navigators are supporters, the supporter writing mode applies to them. They will have a hard time changing the story once it is written because they find narrative structure by writing the story. Also, because of their extroverted sensing, they tend to hone their prose, which solidifies it even more. Navigators therefore hate rewriting and restructuring the most. They have a need for whatever they write to be solid in terms of narrative and structure and content, so that they just have to hone the prose, which is pretty much the opposite approach of how cartographers do it. This leads us to an important piece of advice that navigators need to listen to. They need to prepare the most of all the types before they start writing. The strategist writers do that, for instance, because they are so insistent on their vision, but the navigators don't always do that, but they really should do that. Research characters, world building, because if they want elements to be part of the journey, then they need to bring them to the journey before they start so that these elements can get incorporated because of the nature of the supporter writing mode. It's just really hard for them to compartmentalize their text and move stuff around. And also, they find narrative structure by writing the text. And if they suddenly start moving stuff around, they destroy that structure that they found. And thirdly, they would destroy the flow of the scene and the performance. Everything is being written as one solid chunk. And if you have information prepared, then that is going to be part of that chunk. If they figure out stuff too late, then the text is already written and the journey has been made without these elements. They want to write a larger piece. They just have to prepare stuff in the real world in terms of like documents with a lot of notes. They have so many notes. J.K. Rowling, for instance, the way she wrote Harry Potter is a very interesting exploration of how navigator writers write their stories.
It felt as though I was carving a book out of this mass of notes, and that's in effect what I did.
For comparison, the explorer writers are less likely to have a clear vision before they even start to write, and they are more likely to discover it as they write, which is why they often don't feel the need to prepare so much information beforehand, and they more often rely on finding this information during the writing process. Navigators are a lot more insecure about their performance than strategists because their own introverted feeling is in the shadow and wants to be fortified against the possibility of negative feedback. Navigators are the least likely to look for writing advice as their introverted intuition follows its own interests and their shadow extroverted thinking distrusts other people's input and opinions, and their writing oftentimes is rather original and risky because of this. Strategists really try for originality, but they are not as original as the navigators. Strategists ultimately want to create a valuable achievement that will impact an audience, and therefore they have to follow certain rules. And navigators oftentimes just write whatever they want to write, and that of course is true originality. The genres navigators write in are romance, a little bit of romantasy, lots of semi-autobiographical stuff, also crime fiction, mystery, science fiction, but with a strong attachment to reality, because impactor writers usually have one foot at least firmly in reality. And they always take influence from reality and from the current events and the political situation, the social situation, and so on. And finally, let's talk about the strategists. They are convincers who are also impactors. The extroverted sensing, introverted intuition is their impactor side, and the extroverted thinking, introverted feeling is their convincer side. The strategist writers are the ENTJ, INTJ, ESFP, and ISFP, and they make the most filmmakers out there by far. Since introverted intuition and introverted feeling are combined within the conscious of a strategist, they are doubly insistent on their chosen elements. They have the impulse of their willpower drawing them toward achieving their desired goal, and their introverted feeling gets really invested in that desire, to the point that they may put it above other things in their lives. What does this double insistence mean? Well, for that, let's remind ourselves of how impactors get new ideas. Extroverted sensing delivers a lot of new input from the physical environment to introverted intuition, which processes that input and decides on what it wants, what it desires. Now, if we add introverted thinking to that, like what we have in navigators, then any such new desires are simply validated. It is true that I want this now, and it doesn't matter what I wanted before. This is why some navigators might struggle sticking to one project. But if we add introverted feeling, which is the situation with strategist writers, then there are certain desires that are preferred and more important to the strategist. Strategists with their introverted feeling and introverted intuition get invested in certain desires, and they keep those desires even if the physical input is missing. An example is this. A strategist might daydream about a person that they want, long after they had last seen them. But navigators tend to forget that person rather quickly, because they are too busy especially with all these new desires that they get from their environment, which their introverted thinking constantly validates. They visualize a desired scene or vision and are often capable of structuring the path toward it entirely within their minds. All strategists can do this for the next scene, but some can even plot an entire novel in their minds that way. They are fast readers and learners and can acquire impressive skill and knowledge in a short amount of time, but they do not retain that knowledge for long. They need to keep practicing all their lives. They can quickly breeze through any text and gather all the knowledge that they need and quickly form connections in their minds. They are always driven by a powerful desire to craft an achievement that is capable of impacting audiences in a strong way. It is all about crafting the ultimate performance and/or achievement, which will immortalize the writer in the memory of mankind, and ideally the value that they're trying to advocate for. They insist on the purity of their vision the most, and since their vision is something that they are very invested in, so it is also an expression of their identity, they are highly invested in getting it exactly right. And that of course leads to a lot of procrastination. If I start it now, it's gonna fail, so I need to keep preparing, and so on. But it also leads to a lot of, I don't want to give it to other people to read yet because I know it's not good enough yet. So they never actually show it to people and they never actually get the feedback because they are so protective of their emotional investment. But at the same time, their introverted intuition, introverted feeling combination makes them very impatient, which can make them use shortcuts and quick fixes that ultimately take away from the quality of their final achievement. The genres strategist writers write in are most crime fiction, mystery, horror, historical fiction. That's the impactor part, by the way. The Navigators also write historical fiction because extroverted sensing users for some reason really like to write historical fiction. Strategists also like to write near-future sci-fi. And that was it for the Quadra video. By now, you should be able to tell with a reasonably high degree of confidence which Quadra you belong to. Knowing your Quadra is already a huge step, as there's already a lot of insight, a lot of valuable insight that can help you along in your writing career and give you the ability to make informed decisions about whatever you want to do next. I'm not exactly sure if there's going to be another video in which we are going to go deeper into the Quadras, but for now this would be the conclusion of season 1, and I hope I will see you in future seasons.